Good morning to you in view land, listen, radio land, TV land, wherever you are. It's a very cold Friday morning here in New York City. Very cold. I think when I checked the temperature a little while ago, it was like 18 degrees. That's Fahrenheit, 18 degrees Fahrenheit. And in addition to that, we have a wind chill effect that is at about they said minus 1 degree. So we're in a very cold place this morning. But I'm happy that if you're here in New York, if you're in Guyana, wherever you are, in London, England, in Japan, in South Africa, in Martinique, around the Caribbean, wherever you are, it's wonderful to have your company this morning. Some people in Canada have been hitting me and asking me, why are you not calling our name? Why are you not calling our country or the name of our country? You're being biased. And, I'm not being biased. It's just that sometimes you forget to mention all of the countries in which people, people view you, from which people view you. So don't feel left out. You are part of the family too. Um, I must apologize for the late start. We had a late start this morning, or we having a late start, and that's primarily because of the fact that um, emergencies happen on the way. Today of all days, my vehicle chose to get a puncture, sustained a puncture of all the days. But we compensating for that because this morning we have the Honorable Christopher Jones MP with us, and we also have as a double blessing uh, the Honorable Coretta McDonald MP. We've got the opposition whip in the house, and we've also got the shadow Minister of Labor in the house. And we're going to be talking about a couple of things, a few things this morning. I'm extremely happy to have Mr. Jones in particular on this morning. This is the man with a lot of fire in his bowels. He's been eating a lot of fire and he's been giving off a lot of fire. So it means that there's a lot of fire stacked up inside. Mr. Jones, good morning to you and welcome to the In Perspective show. Good morning to Coretta McDonald as well. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, we on the show we talk things Guyana in particular, especially those things that are hot. And Guyanese are known to like a lot of spicy food. But when our lives are made hot and spicy, we're not necessarily comfortable about that. And for those of us who are just getting ourselves together, I'd like to remind us that just a few short months ago, as soon as they were legally pushed into office, the PPP pounced. You can't say swooped down, you can't say went home or went home too. The PPP swooped down via the Ghana police force on Mr. Jones' residence and made him look as though he's one of the biggest criminals in Guyana. I'm not sure where that situation is headed. I'm not sure what the status of that issue. So I'd like to ask Mr. Jones, um, who served in the AP and UFC administration as I think it was the director of sport, and he's now the opposition whip. Um, just in a few words, sir, could you give us an update on that particular situation where the PPP sent the police to invade the privacy of your home, so to speak, and made you look like, you know, I think worse than Blackie or Fine Man in Guyana?
All right, thank you very much, and Bransford. Let me first take the opportunity to apologize to you and your viewers. I know we were initially scheduled to have this conversation on Wednesday one, but because of conflicting uh, activities at the same time, I was unable to be part. So I just wanted to apologize to you and your viewers and let you know, your viewers, that no disrespect was intended on my part. As it relates to the incident or the invasion, some would want to put it into my home by the Guyana Police Force on the instruction, on the political instruction and directive by the People's Progressive Party Civic. As you know, the barber chairs and equipment was given to me through this select program. Those have been taken out of the house. They're in some bond stored somewhere. I don't know where. But my lawyers, which include the Nigel used, they have since filed a court action. One seeks to sue court for violating my constitutional rights. Two, to bring back the items that were removed from the home, and as well bringing prosecution to those police officers who violated my rights and, of course, that of the Constitution. That matter is still set to come up in the courts. You know that hearings or matters in the courts of Guyana, particularly under the PPP, takes months, if not years, before those are heard. We are still awaiting our day in court. What I am hearing from the prosecution side is that there is a difficulty for them to get any evidence from the police to justify why they did what they did, because they know that it was unlawful. And as such, they haven't made any petition to the court as yet. We are still awaiting a date for the matter to be heard in the court.
Very good. It was very unfortunate. I think we had the whole of the right thinking Guyanese community behind you. You still have us behind you, and we trust that everything goes well. Like, I've been saying that it's time that somebody does something in Guyana to cause the bullies, whether they be from the APNU side or the PPP side, but we have not been experiencing the bullyism from the APNU side so far, thank God. But it is time that somebody does something in there to put these kinds of behavior from government officials to rest, and especially when they're using the state finance, the state funded Guyana Police Force to do their mischief. I don't know if members of the force don't realize that they are being used and misused and abused. But what is of interest, and then I'll switch to Coretta for a minute. What is of interest to me and to a lot of us as Guyanese is that I served I saw Guyana in the capacity of um, vice vice president of the Athletic Association of Guyana, and we interacted a lot with Mr. Neil Kumar. A lot of our policies, our ideology, our philosophy are not in sync, but at least he was a person who knew where boundaries lay. But I'm finding that the current, well, even Frank Anthony, who was the minister at the time, I'm finding that uh, the current minister of youth, sports, and culture, however they put it together,
Yeah.
um, is more of a dictator within the sporting fraternity in Guyana. I
Yeah.
noticed he made a statement the other day where he um, called for persons to pay homage to him, so to speak, whenever you're organizing any event or anything of the sort. As somebody who has just left
Mhm.
the office of director of sports, how do you find this particular kind of behavior in the sporting fraternity? And the reason why I'm asking the question, the reason why I'm concerned is because I don't want to shine on your or rain on your parade, rather. But I remember even while I served on the Ghana Football Association, I remember that at the time, Mr. Klaas, who was the president, had a little run-in with the government, and they thought the same PPP government sought
Mhm.
to take control of the organization, and FIFA came in and warned them, cautioned them severely about government interference in sports.
Mhm.
What is your take on this whole thing, and how do we intend? I know you're not the shadow minister of sport, but how do we intend to address this from the perspective of a person who has just left the office of director of sports?
All right. So essentially, what you're seeing there, is the dictatorial tendencies of the People's Progressive Party Civic. And one would say that they're shocked because one would have expected Charles Ramson, being a new person, a young person now taking up a political office in this country, that you will expect something different from him. But essentially, he comes from the same stock. He comes from the same People's Progressive Party Civic, and in them there is a dictatorial tendencies in that party and the manner in which they govern and operate. You would have read, as you mentioned, in terms of him saying that organizations and so forth must seek his blessings before they can proceed. That is not how a government functions. That's how a government works with associations and federations. You work with them, not you direct them. All of these bodies, the various associations and federation, are governed by their constitution or their international obligation to the international bodies that they're affiliated with. While we were in office, we never once attempted to direct or instruct any of the federations and associations. We paid keen attention to what they were doing and ensuring that they adhere to their own constitution, which governs them. But as I mentioned before, it is the same dictatorial tendencies in the People's Progressive Party Civic that you see Charles Ramson operated in the same manner. I think it was Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan who referred to them as control freakism because they believe that in order to govern, they must be in full total control. And that is not obtained in any modern democracy. What we will be doing as a opposition, particularly the shadow minister with responsibility for sports, which is Mr. German Figueroa, is that essentially we will be meeting with the various associations and federations and reminding them that guided by their constitution, that is how they govern their various bodies. And of course, we will be taking this matter up not only in the press, but in the National Assembly, drawing it to Ramson's attention that listen, you have a boundary of which you cannot cross. And to say that you will withhold funding, access to facilities, to the various organization is unbecoming. It doesn't all work for the development of the particular sport because when you restrict access to facilities or you deny funding, it is not the the executive of the governing body of a various association or federation is affected, but it affects all of the athletes, and that is what must be your primary objective, to ensure that the athletes, the well-being of the athletes, the access to facilities so they can prepare themselves is first and foremost on your agenda. But to say that you restrict the organization as a whole, you are hindering the preparation of the athletes. But as I said before, it is the same dictatorial tendencies of the People's Progressive Party Civic that we're seeing now in Charles Ramson Jr. Control freakism.
That leads me to another point. It is known that the I mean Charles Ramson cannot obviously be speaking to anybody in the Guyana Cricket Board or whatever the organization is now called. He could obviously not be speaking to anybody there because they would not even pay him any money. That's an organization that is self-financing and everything.
Correct.
So is it fair for one to conclude, therefore, that this, in a very sly way, or let me put it different, let me phrase it differently. Should I consider myself naive if I say to myself that the government is addressing the issue holistically rather than trying to further marginalize a particular cross section of the Guyanese society? Am I naive in saying that?
I wouldn't say that you're naive in saying that, but it comes back again, as I said before, is that we have to look at the bigger picture, as I mentioned before, in terms of how the PPP operates. And not only it is not only reflected in Charles Ramson modus operandi as Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, but throughout the entire country. And it is a worrying, very worrying factor, a very worrying development. And that is why essentially I think the leader of the opposition called to the attention of CARICOM, the OAS, and the international bodies, because it is a tendency of the PPP that unless they can control you, unless they can strike fear into you, the use of the police force to conduct or do their bidding, the use of the judiciary, as seeing what is happening in the court system now, and even, I would attempt to say, even in the office of the Director of Public Prosecution, right? And it is a worrying factor. So what you see happening with Charles Ramson is just a tip of the iceberg, because he is part and parcel of the administration, which is the PPP, and it is the dictatorial tendencies. In just 5 months, you are already seeing all that was obtained in this country under the 23 years of the PPP, the heinous crimes. And when you think that you will see an investigation as what was obtained under the APNU AFC government, you get report from the police now that some tree junkie and all of that. It is a worrying trend. It is all of the red flags are up, and we have to take note of it. So Charles Ramson is just a tip of the iceberg. It is a much larger or deeper problem that we have in Guyana right now under the PPP.
Taking note of that, I observed that your colleague, Miss McDonald, was involved in a battle of words, war of words with the now most distinct. I think there's a name that has been attached to her. The Guyana City girl, they call her over here. I think I hear people saying something like that. The Minister of Education over, the issue of the material being given to the children in school to use. It has been observed for a while that I guess from the inception, it was on Facebook. There was a post to the effect on Facebook where students were in a virtual classroom and they were being introduced, or they were introduced to some video presentation. And in the presentation, there were a lot of expletives that run off before the person who was controlling it realized what was going on. I think You have made some very startling observations with regard to the material being given to our students in Ghana to use, and you made some attempt to refer to it. What was the minister's response, in you trying to bring to the attention of herself and the nation that the quality of the material was very poor? You're muted.
Hi, sorry. Good morning again, O'Neill. Thanks for having me on your program, and good morning to your listeners all across from wherever they are listening. It's amazing, and like Chris said, we have seen the return of the old tigers. Maybe their
Yes.
stripes are going to be even more pronounced now. And this is not only manifested in little ways, but it's manifested in every aspect of the ministries across this country. So what we had happening just a few days ago, it was on Monday, where the entire world on Sunday observed International Day of Education. And so we were reflecting on that on Monday on the APNU AFC's Rush Hour program. And we were talking about where we were a couple of years ago, where we are now, and more especially with the invent of COVID, which would have caused every plan that you would have had to be toppled. And you now have to invent new plans, new modes of operation with regards to being able to engage the students. What I did highlight on that program was what our students, where we were then in the education system, and what we are doing now. I complimented the Ministry of Education with regards to them being able to reach out after we would have had consultations, discussions with the Ministry of Education on how we are going to be able to engage our students. And so I complimented them on taking, with regards to taking on board the initiative of having printed materials, worksheets, workbooks, a whole pile of it, maybe 5, 6 weeks together. And we're sending those out to the students, especially those who are living in the deep hinterland, because we recognize that with COVID, it is difficult to have the face-to-face interactions. And so I complimented them, like I said, on having that aspect so we can reach out to those students. But after examining those materials that we had, and let me back up a little, before August 2015, we had maybe 2 or 3 senior officers from within the Ministry of Education. And this would have been from the primary, the secondary, the nursery level, who would have identified specialist teachers. And these teachers were the ones that were used to put together reading materials, because they were specialists, reading materials, issues with activities for mathematics, activities for grammar, and that's in the private primary school. But in the secondary school, we say English, English A, English B, the sciences, and so on. What I recognized would have happened, and this is factual, what I recognized would have happened is that those teams were disbanded. Those education officers no longer have control over those groupings of people. They were disbanded, new persons were brought on stream. And because we brought new persons on stream, and I'm not sure what mechanism was used to identify these people, the result is we have been doling out millions and millions and millions of dollars to print these materials. But in doling out all of these millions, we're having too many mistakes in these books. And that is what I highlighted on the program. And I went as far as talking about my grade 1 child, my grade 7 niece, my grade 2 nephew, and other parents would have indicated to me the numerous mistakes that they're seeing in those worksheets. You had words incorrectly spelled. You had mathematics problems, and I can give you this example from the top of my head. There's a problem there I think it's coming from either grade 2 or a grade 3, but I have the evidence where there was a subtraction problem set up. But when you put, I'm going to use this figure wildly. We were subtracting 5 from 7. So that you had there 7 obstacles, 7 drawings, and then you were subtracting. Rather than taking 5 from 7, we took 2. The drawing there showed 2 objects were marked off from the 7. And so right there, you're confusing our children. And that was one of the issues that I highlighted. I highlighted another issue where, coming from my grade 1 child, you had one of the literacy booklets, the bottom of the page not properly printed, so you don't know what is happening there. Coming out of that same literacy, you had diagrams, and this is because we're doing mass production, and nobody is taking the time to check to see what is happening there. So you're printing pictures, but the pictures are black, so the children can't identify what is happening in the pictures. And I highlighted those facts. But like everything else, the dictatorship in those people and the pompousness in the Minister of Education, rather than taking that as a note of being able to correct future printing, she took to the Ministry of Education's Facebook page, and this is what they're doing. They're using every state apparatus that they have control over to attack persons. So she took to the Ministry of Education's Facebook page to attack Coretta MacDonald, not as a parent, not as a teacher, not as the General Secretary of the GTU, but as an APNU AFC activist who's masquerading herself, and she's dishonest. Now, when I saw that post, I didn't waste time to call Priya Manik Chand or to WhatsApp her a message. Right away, I screenshot some of the comments that parents and the teachers placed on that page, and I posted them on my page, and I said, Priya Manik Chand, you dispute these now. Since you're alarmed, the ministry is alarmed at my utterances, dispute these. And I also posted some of the pictures with the names of the title of the workbooks. I posted them, and I posted we had the issues, and I said to her, dispute these. I've not seen her I'm not seeing her responding to that, but I've seen some of her tags. In particular, one, Paul La Cruz, and another one, Earl Domingo. They have taken to start attacking Coretta MacDonald. They're not seeing it as a way, my highlighting or me highlighting the issues that we have in those workbooks. They're not seeing that as a way for us to remedy the system and to make proper printing the next time we're going to do proper printing, or to pull persons in to say, look, check this, look, workbook X, grade 1, this. Where they're not seeing it that way. They're seeing it as Coretta MacDonald, APNU AFC activists attacking the education system. I mean, when we make mistakes, people have to critique what you do. And that's the only way we can get things better, but they don't want to see it that way. They see Coretta MacDonald as this APNU AFC activist, and rather than doing GTU's business, which is the other STEM that they've gone on to, Coretta MacDonald, General Secretary of the GTU, and the Member of Parliament for the AFC, APNU AFC, conflict of interest. She's not looking after teachers' business. She's always opposing everything. And so I had to say to a few persons, I mean, I'm going on for a while. I had to say to a few of them, this was my response. Coretta MacDonald, General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union, Member of Parliament for the APNU AFC. My colleague, C. Paul Narain, General Secretary of GAU, Member of Parliament of the People's Progressive Party. government. Let me hear your comments. I have not seen, except for those who are sensible, I have not seen any of her lagoons, any of her tags responding to that. But the issue here is to personally attack persons who, in their view, are very oppositive, or persons who are strong that they can't stand up to. So they find other means to be able to degrade you. But I had to say to them, and I will continue to say this, Priya Manik Chand, Charles Ramson, Barajagio, Ifran Ali, the whole clique of them, none of them can discredit me because of one thing, or maybe two. Coretta MacDonald is a practicing teacher. Priya Manik Chand never sat in front of a classroom to mark any child's book. She never stood in front of a blackboard to conduct any class. The same for Charles Ramson, the same for Ifran Ali, the same for Gail Teixeira, except for Barajagio, who was a teacher for a very short period. They don't know what it is to stand in front of a classroom. So they can't talk to me when it comes to the business of education, classroom management. They can't talk to me about it. Benefits for teachers and so on, they can't talk to me about it. The other fact is, Coretta MacDonald is an independent thinker. Coretta MacDonald doesn't have to go to Barajagio for any help or to make deals under, above, or over the table when he was president. Coretta MacDonald stood her ground. And I would have caused people to reflect their minds back to when, in 2018, when Coretta MacDonald opposed the APNU AFC government, the party which she's a supporter of, when they messed with our teacher. So Coretta MacDonald is not a fly-by-night person. And whatever they seem to want to do, it's not going to shut me up in any way. Never, ever. They would not be able to shut me up. Because Priya Manik Chand did not give me, she didn't do any favors for me. None of them have done any favors for me. So they can't shut me up. Kwame Mackay, with the talks that he got in his mouth, as a matter of fact, his reason for being in parliament is to make himself a fool. The same for Joe Hamilton, just to make themselves fools. Because you know what? We would have noticed some of the other members of parliament who are on the government side, they don't say anything, but their hinge persons are Kwame Mackay, wherever he named they want to be. Like I had to tell him yesterday, because when I started speaking across the floor, like I would always do and I will continue to do, they get upset for that. So Kwame would respond for them. And then Charles, the one who doesn't understand, who doesn't know phonics, who every time I go to parliament, I have to walk with the fun with phonics booked for him. He doesn't know phonics. He's an embarrassment to the legal fraternity. He's an embarrassment to his entire family because, you know, I get very worked up sometimes, so I'm not going to go there. But I'm saying this to say they can't shut me up. So
All
they
right.
can say whatever they want to say, whatever they want to try to do to discredit me, it's not going to make the teachers budge. Because like I tell them, Coretta MacDonald has been general secretary for the past, I can't remember how many years, but I don't have the figure right here now. But I can tell you from 2006, I've been general secretary. I've had many oppositions, many persons running against Coretta MacDonald, which is democracy. In the GTU, we promote and we practice democracy. So anybody is open to run for general secretary. But if you get to some of the persons who competed against me and you ask them what was the result, they would tell you. And I'm not saying this because I want to be proud, but I'm saying this because the teachers in Guyana, they believe in Coretta MacDonald, because what I have been doing over the years, going out of my way, going out of the realm of GTU's mandate to ensure that our teachers and our students are properly taken care of. Parents, teachers as well as students. They give me credit for that. So I'm not going to look to Priya or anybody else for any credit. And outside of that, my name, every time I do something good and I reach out to persons, my name is given another tick in the Lamb's Book of Life. I'm certain about that. So I don't have to wait on Priya Manikchan and the whole crew.
Well, at least that is a message that has been sent to them. It was loud and clear, so at least they've gotten the message. But I mean, it doesn't take away from the bullyism that is evident in their style of. I don't want to
That's
call
true.
it governance. I don't know what to call it. The only thing I can call it is control, because that's what Putin does in Russia. That's what Xi does in China. So that's the only thing I could call it is, well, their attempt at controlling. But I want to jump back to Mr. Jones for a minute. We understand that Coretta McDonald is the General Secretary of the GTU, and I guess by now a lot of us have gotten to know and understand the role of the General Secretary of the GTU. But I don't understand this whip business. I mean, Mr. Jones is the opposition whip in Parliament. What was it that we need a whip for? I mean, do we use him to beat people with, or I mean, up here I understand that you have whips, but you have a democracy that is flowing here, is thriving here. So the people need to get people together, because each man, like you said, Coretta, thinketh of his own or on his own, so that the whip is used as the person who has the task of convincing everybody that they should be behind a particular policy that is being brought to the floor. Is that evident in Guyana? Do we have such a problem in Guyana where there is need for a whip, like somebody to pull the votes together on the opposition side, or is it taken that everybody is in sync with what's going on there?
Well, essentially, but everyone would be in sync because there is caucus before every sitting of the National Assembly, where all of the members of Parliament are fully aware in terms of the matter that is coming before the House and what is the AP and UAFC's policy position as it relates to that particular matter. Of course, the whip has several responsibility. Among them includes ensuring that all of the members of Parliament are in the House or in the complex or in a space in which they can be quickly reached if it comes to a vote having to be taken. Ensuring that those members of Parliament who have been identified to speak on that particular matter, that he or she is fully prepared. At times, you take a glance at their prepared text to ensure that is in keeping with the standing orders, or point out to them that the speaker may interrupt you for this particular word, but this is how you respond to that, and so forth. And generally, is to ensure that the opposition side of the House, that we are kept informed, intact in terms of the parliamentary agenda, and of course provide the necessary guidance as it relates to the standing orders of the National Assembly. Not to literally whip persons, but ensuring that the policy that guides the AP and UAFC is followed through the presentation that they make.
Very, very important portfolio indeed. The reason for me asking this, or the key reason for me asking that question, is because some people in the government side, try to give the impression that Mr. Jones is a nobody. He is not important to the functioning of the parliament, or at least to the functioning of the opposition, and that kind of stuff. So, and some people even give you the impression that he's so insignificant, kind of, that we're gonna ensure that he goes to jail and all kinds of nonsense. So we want people to understand that Mr. Christopher Jones is not a pushover. That's number one. My understanding is that he has significant responsibilities in the parliament. And I need to remind people, or I need for you to correct me if I'm saying the wrong thing, that based on the behavior. I know what the Constitution says, and so on, but based on
Mhm.
the behavior of our PPP comrades in the Parliament during the last Parliament, I should say, some members carried on because the behavior was not becoming, and it didn't meet parliamentary standards, and the police were asked to intervene and all of that, and people made allegations that people touched them, sex with sexual, what I'm saying. So, um, just for clarification, are our parliamentarians safe from just ragtag persecution and prosecution? Do they have rights? Are they allowed to be just dragged around the place by the police like that, like if they have no owner or they don't come from any place of integrity? I mean, what rights and privileges do our parliamentarians really have?
Right. All right. So there are rights, some of which are enshrined in the Constitution. For example, I'll give you an example. On a particular sitting of day of the Parliament, parliamentarian in his or her pursuit to get to the Parliament, the police cannot stop or detain them. They have rights in which to overtake to get to the parliament, and we are somewhat protected by the constitution to allow us to do that. Inside of the National Assembly as well too, there are rights that governs the entire parliament and how the parliamentarian operate. Of course, like every right, there is a responsibility, and of course that is where the Speaker of the National Assembly would intervene. What we note in the 12th Parliament, as we are now, as compared to the 11th and the 10th Parliament, the difference is essentially the speakers. In the 10th Parliament, we had Minister Raphael Trotman, who was the speaker at that time. And in the 11th Parliament, there was, forgive me, senior moment here. But essentially, the rulings by
Mrs.
those
Scotland?
two speakers allow, sorry? Mr.
No, that's
Scotland, correct,
Mr.
correct.
Scotland, yeah.
The, yeah, the ruling and the guidance from those speakers allow parliamentarians, even in the face of the speaker disallowing a particular bill, question, or motion to be heard, is that they would have allowed the members of parliament to place their argument on record, even if at the end of that you will have that. You will still have the disallowment of the particular motion. Just last night in the National Assembly, we had an incident which I consider, as I mentioned before, the worrying trend that we see happening in Guyana now. Is that essentially the motion, there was a motion that was tabled by Member Parliament Geeta Edmund as it relates to the Henry Boys murder and that of Harish Singh. The Speaker of the National Assembly indicated that the matter is sub judice. Senior parliamentarians and senior attorney at law, such as Mr. Kemraj Rambutan, Mr. Royce Ford, try to interject and try to draw to the Speaker's attention that his predecessor, in the face of a matter that was ruled sub judice, this was the ruling, and the argument was allowed to be placed on the record. Last night, we saw a blatant display of dictatorial tendencies that the speaker wasn't even allowing the member to speak, right? I mean, as I said before, his predecessors will allow you to speak, to place your arguments, and at the end of you having that opportunity to speak, he will say, well, I heard you, but the matter is still disallowed. Last night we saw a complete opposite, which has never occurred before, at least in the period that I've been around the National Assembly, and it has been for a number of years, subject to correction, about 17 years of which not being a member of the Parliament, but even but working as a public relations officer for the then leader of the opposition, Robert Corbyn. So those trends that we're seeing, and particularly that of the Speaker of the National Assembly last night, is most worrying. We remind people that the APNU AFC members of parliament sit there as a result of 49% of the population that voted in the last elections. So the PPP can't say that because they have a 51%, they rule everything, and the 49% and their voices, which are heard through the members of parliament, are shut out. It is a worrying trend, because if the parliamentarians, the elected official representing 49% of the voting population of the country, is not allowed to seek clarification in the National Assembly. If you're not allowed to speak or seek clarification in the National Assembly, then your only resort then is to speak in the streets. And as I said before, you're seeing these trends. Having grown up in the Essequibo Coast, the old folks over there would always say, every day bucket a go well. One
Yes.
day I'm going to drop out. Or some might say every long rope has an end. And you're seeing this. It appears now that the Guyanese people have no redress, can't seek recourse. And it appears that you can't seek it through the Guyana police force. There is no redress to be had in the judiciary. And now it appears that it's non-existent in the Parliament of Guyana. So if you can't speak at those existing institutions that are there to allow you to seek redress and recourse, then the only action is left for the people of Guyana is take to the streets. Have your voices heard in the streets. And as a responsible opposition, we have been speaking ad nauseum to the powers that be, whether it's in the police force, the judiciary, and the parliament and the government, that we've been speaking ad nauseum about these worrying trends that we're seeing. And when it comes to the point in which the Guyanese people decide that they will take their own actions in the streets, the opposition will have no other recourse but to support their action, because we too acknowledge and recognize that there's no other recourse to be taken.
I'm happy that you alluded to. That's a good segue to that particular point that I have down here. I'm going to ask Coretta a little bit about her role yesterday, but I want to ask you, Mr. Jones, who is the president of Guyana? I've been getting this question very often. Who is the president of Guyana? And I'll give you the reason for the question, because a number of persons have been observing that many of our official presidential engagements are being attended to by the vice president. And when people uh, comment on or express their views in regards to what they're observing, the bullyism in the PPP, the rank and file come out, and they come on the Facebook and what have you and attack as though attacking is just something that they can do. But somebody asked me the question the other day, and I couldn't answer them, because I mean, the response I could have given to them was, well, I figured that officially on paper, Irfan Ali is the president, but Guyana has a de facto president who appears to be Barra Jagdeo. So, as the opposition whip officially, who is the president of Guyana really?
All right. So to answer that, let me just go a bit back. We would recall that when Barrett Jagdeo was president of Guyana, there were attempts by persons within his inner circle to seek to change the constitution of Guyana to permit him to have a third term. Barra Jagdeo at the time said that he's not interested, that he wants to go and set up some farm and raise grandchildren and that sort of thing. And then lo and behold, we saw persons who were close to his inner ring having an individual tabled a petition in the courts of Guyana. It went all the way up to the Caribbean Court of Justice. At the time, Barra Jagdeo disassociated himself from the court actions that were being taken. But he never said that if the action went in the positive direction in which he could have a third term, whether or not he will run. That matter was shot down by the Caribbean Court of Justice. So I want to first put that on record in terms of Barra Jagdeo's attempt since back then to essentially be a Vladimir Putin, right? To have a third term. Juxtaposed to now, we know within the central executive of the People's Progressive Party Civic that the party members there identify two individuals to be their presidential candidate. It was Bharat Jagdeo, General Secretary, who single-handedly chosen Irfan Ali. The party members were of and still are of the view that the role and function of Irfan Ali is essentially there as a front person to front as, but behind the scene, the actual person who will be executing things of that nature is Bharat Jagdeo. So if you would want to say that this is in some way a third term for Bharat Jagdeo based on the engagements, the international engagements and pronouncements coming out from him, I would say that indeed this is his third term.
Is there anything the parliament can do to prevent him from usurping the authorities of the president, the office of the president?
Well, they would essentially no. I mean, you could place an argument, but essentially the answer that you will get is that the president could direct any of his ministers or vice presidents to execute any particular function, representing him at any area and so forth.
Wow, I know that there's some pushback from in our quarters here. I've gotten some scoop that people here, funders, heavy funders, and some other influential personnel are expressing now openly their view that there was no desire on their part to have Bharat Jagdeo play any role in the top office of the country. That's why they supported. And I can tell you for a fact that I saw some of the communication that went back and forth between the folk here and the folk at home during the elections and past. And there were a lot of them were saying Ali is the right man to bring Guyana back together. He's the man, he will govern for all, he will govern all of Guyana like it should be done. But well, it seems as though it's not. But I want to jump to the a video that by now in Guyanese circles may have gone Guyanese viral, for the want of a better term, that was released last night. I saw MP the Honorable Coretta MacDonald having need to offer a word of prayer on behalf of the Henrys family. Mr. Jones alluded to the speaker's bullish tactics last night. What gave rise specifically to the little display that we had there? I mean, it was an expression of utter frustration. Creda, would you mind telling us what you know of the situation that led to that outburst yesterday or last evening?
Bradford, this entire issue of this brutal murder of the Henry's boys is not an event that we can ever erase from our minds because of the fact, the manner, as a matter of fact, the manner with which those boys were murdered. I'm sure persons can recall the funeral day when you watched the mortal remains of those two young men lying in that casket. There were times when you weren't sure whether it was those two boys. That in itself, apart from them being dead, that in itself has caused great pain. It has created a severe wound in the parents, the siblings, other relatives, and the persons in the community. It has created that wound in their hearts. And then to be going back and forth and back and forth with this illegal regime who seem to be saying, we would leave no stones unturned. We are going to get to the bottom of this. We are going to get to the bottom of this. And yet when you have the opportunity to get to the bottom of it, you are withdrawing, you are backpedaling. And so the parents of the Henry boys were there at Parliament yesterday. They sat through the entire afternoon session to listen to the motions that were brought by the Honorable Gita Chandan. While sitting there, I guess in their minds, there was some sort of flame glowing that coming out of the motions that were presented there, and we were given the notion that those motions would have been heard. So they sat there with some bit of hope. But then, almost to the end of it, as a matter of fact, when Madam Gita was presenting her motion on the Lusignan issue where a prisoner lost his life, they claimed that the prisoner attacked and the prisoner was shot and he was killed. But when upon close examination, you recognize that that prisoner was shot in his back. And so that in itself created lots and lots of questions in persons' mind, where persons are saying, how is it that a young man was attacking and he was not shot somewhere in front, in his chest, in his face, in his groin, somewhere there, but he was shot in his back? So what Gita was doing, Gita was calling for a commission of inquiry. That was shot down. And then, lo and behold, when we saw Joe Hamilton getting up there to respond to that motion, he, in actual fact, he blatantly said, the Henry's boys, the loss of those lives, it really matter. What their government is focusing now is making the prison environment and these are his exact words, 100 times better than the APNU AFC government had it. And so the prisoners there are going to enjoy better life while they're in prison. There isn't going to ever be another prison fire. There isn't going to ever be starvation in the prisons. And the issue of the Henry's boys' murder and that of Naresh Singh was as if it did not happen for the PPP. So the parents sitting there and a brother of Joel sitting there, hearing that, it caused all of that pain to resurface. More so when we were told that the speaker will not entertain that motion, and he tried to give all kinds of reasons. Of course, highlighting the fact that the matter is now engaging the courts and 3 persons were charged. That angered the parents. They left immediately. What you saw in that video was the parliamentarians from the APNU AFC coalition hurriedly leaving the dome to reach out to those parents. When we got, you saw us on the outside because they were leaving in haste. As a matter of fact, we had to ask the brother of Joel, I think his name is Colwyn, to go quickly call your mother, because when we recognized, and for persons who know her well, when they recognized the haste she was heading out there with, persons decided that wasn't good for her, and we needed to get them in to bring some sort of consoling and comforting to them, to ease some of the tension before they headed on their way home to the west coast of Berbice. In the midst of us talking with the mothers, the 2 mothers, the father of Isaiah, the brother of Joel, trying to console them, Isaiah's mother started acting up. She started acting up because she was saying they walked the entire Bagdam at number 3, and I think 2 other villages. And within those Bagdams, they found no marijuana fields that they heard peddling in the news media, talking about marijuana fields, and the boys sprayed the marijuana plants and killed them, and all kinds of foolishness that are now being surfaced. And so she was saying, I walked there was none. We went to the point where these young men bodies were found. It was far from where they said they were, and she was getting worked up. And in the midst of that, she fainted. She lost consciousness. And so what you saw us doing there was out of compassion. We were reaching out to the family members, and we decided that we were going to ask for divine intervention to bring some sort of comfort and strength to this family. While all of that was happening, the dictators sat in the chambers. Some of them sat in the dining room. Some of them lingered across, just walking past on the outside and peeping. None of them, this same caring government, illegal government that they say they are, none of them came out there to offer any word of comfort to that family. None of them. None. And this is what is frightening. Because if you listen to the mother of Joel Henry, you are going to understand not only the pain of a mother and the cry of a mother, and to see the tears of a mother rolling down, but you'll understand that those family members are desperate for justice, and they have decided that they will get it one way or the other. This is not what we want our society to have to resort to. We want persons to be able to be comfortable with the fact that there are laws, and if persons violate the laws, then there must be the penalties so afforded by the law granted to them, regardless of whether you are a number one supporter of the APNU AFC or the PPPC. But what we have seen happening here, and like the mother of Joel rightfully said, the police know who killed or who were part of the grouping that orchestrated the murders of those two young men. They know. The PPPC, they know. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I want to get the a different perspective, because a lot of people have a lot of anger pent up in relation to this particular issue, and it would seem to a number of us that all hope is lost for the Henry family. Mr. Jones, MP, sorry, Honorable Mr. Jones.
Sorry.
The speaker is not allowing the matter to be heard in the parliament. The police are not doing what ought to be done by way of giving justice, not this fake thing that they're pushing out there. And the government doesn't care, as somebody would say, a rat's behind what goes on in the life of the Henry family members. Then what's next for the Henrys? What's next? Let's assume that this matter goes to the court, and these three young men, as we know, would eventually happen. They are able to prove that they have nothing to do with this situation. Then where does it leave the Henry family? Is there anything that the opposition, the parliamentary opposition, the political opposition can do to ensure that these people get justice?
All right, so
before Chris comes in, let me say to you that outside of the murders of these young men, those families live in torment every 2 days or every 2 nights. You know what is happening there? Cars with heavily tinted cars are pulling up in front of those homes, parking there for long hours. You're hearing voices at nights offering threats to these family members. They are not living in peace. They're getting phone calls and people are threatening them. They're hearing gunshots ringing out. And that is what this family or these two families are going through, in addition to losing 2 young men. And you know what? Desperation, desperation is what is stepping in now. And I don't know where we're going to go. But let me make way for Chris.
Yes, let me hear McDonald
Um,
a few seconds.
Let me say this. Essentially, especially after last night's engagement in the National Assembly of Guyana, I think essentially the combined opposition is at a crossroad in which we have to determine how we proceed. We have attempted, we've tried, and clearly the speaker which controls the National Assembly is biased. And I would want to put that on record. That is my interpretation, that he's biased. And therefore, someone who is biased cannot be impartial. And of course, the management of the National Assembly would be brought into question, as demonstrated by him. The situation with the Henry boys, again, it is a reminder of what was obtained in this country under the People's Progressive Party Civic. It is nothing new. Anytime, and history will tell you that anytime the People's Progressive Party Civic has been in office, there have always been these heinous crime, murders, bombing, whether it's the son Chapman, the RH car that traveled from Georgetown to Linden, whether it's the Monroe, the driver of the Gaisuko truck that was blown up, whether it's the family in Hatfield Street that the house was burnt. And so once the PPP is in power, this is something that trends. In terms of their investigation or the lack thereof to bring closure to people and their family, we saw in the 23 years a demonstration from them. There is no attempt by the People's Progressive Party Civic, and by virtue of the fact that the Ghana police force is now politically directed, there is no attempt to solve the murders of the Henry boys and Harish Singh. I often say to people that in life and politics there is perception and there is reality. And one of the reality there in the Mahaika Borbis region, you go to the residents in the various villages, they will tell you who are some of the suspects in the community that they know are involved in the Henry Boys murder. This information was shared with the police. The police did absolutely nothing in terms of investigating these individuals. And these individuals are known political activists of the People's Progressive Party Civic. You go to the residents there in the Mahaika Borbis region, they will say to you that the Henry boys murder, it's not the first. It happened to another youngster a few years ago. And the said individual who the residents there in the Mahaika Borbis region have fingered as having some involvement in the Henry boys murder is the same individual that has been fingered in the murder of another youngster some years ago. It comes back to what I said before. In any functioning democracy, there are places for recourse and seek redress. The Ghana Police Force is that institution that is charged with the responsibility when it comes to such heinous murders or murders of any sort for an investigation to be had and closure brought to the families. And there is no attempt to do so. We've seen what is happening in the judiciary, and now as blatantly displayed last night in the National Assembly. Then the action is for the people. The people will have to take to the streets and demonstrate their legitimate discontent. And no one could say to the people that why didn't you go to the police? They've been there. Why didn't you go to the courts? They've been there. Why this matter wasn't brought up in the assembly? It was attempted to. So what else do you do? Is it that you will sit and allow people to poke you in the eye and tell you what you're seeing is not so? And because they have the title as government, that you sit back and accept it? No. The world over have demonstrated that where you have this sort of dictatorial tendencies or dictatorship, because we're moving in that direction. The police is directed by the political party, right? The police is directed by the political party. And you have to, at some point in time, you have to fight. You have to fight.
Let me ask you another question there, Mr. Jones. Um, a lot of people are of the opinion that Guyanese throughout Guyana are willing to have their voices heard on the street. Lots of them, tens of thousands. I got feedback since during the electoral impasse,
Mm.
wanted to do so, not to create issues, not to create a situation of civil unrest or anything like that, just purely to show their opposition to some of the things that are happening, especially as practiced by the political the government in office at the moment.
Mhm.
Um, but in some quarters, you get the impression that people are saying they have no leadership in this regard. Some people are saying if we mobilize and organize to take to the streets, we may well find ourselves in a situation where the political directorate of the country, including the opposition, the party now in opposition, may not come and give us the support that we need, and they will leave us out to dry.
Mm.
Um, I am hearing a member of parliament saying that this is what, uh, from a personal perspective, and I'm happy that our MPs on the opposition bench have the privilege of being themselves, speaking for themselves, not
That's
hiding under the cloak of somebody that is pushing you in a direction that Trump, like some that Trumpian kind of something like the PPP is doing. Um,
mhm.
should the people who have just a pure, genuine desire to
Mhm.
protest some of these atrocities,
Yeah.
would they be given the kind of political coverage that is required for them to mobilize and organize and get this this type of action going?
I would say yes. Um, for us, we keep reminding people that you don't have to wait on a political party, a political activist to say to you, go protest. It is enshrined in the Constitution of Guyana. It is a living document that you
But the
have
police
a.
shoot you down.
Sorry.
No, I'm saying, but the police oftentimes shoot people down, and so people look for the coverage of the political directorate.
Right. Well, there you go. So again, as I said, it is enshrined in the Constitution that you have a right to exercise your legitimate discontent of anything, any part of Guyana and so forth. And the political opposition, recognizing your legitimate discontent, lends support to your activities. And whereas that we see, as we've seen in the past, flagrant breaches by the Guyana police force of people's right to demonstrate, right to picket, and so forth. Where those rights are being breached, as we done in the past, the APNU AFC, we will represent the interests of those people. We have to. But as I said before, is that you don't have to wait to hear the leader of the opposition or the MP say must go and protest, because it should not be that. And that's why it's like, out in the United States, for example, that's how Black Lives Matter organization was birthed, because they advocate for the rights of the Afro Americans there, and they brought those injustices that were meted out to Afro Americans in the past, and as such, they exercise that constitutional right that they have, freedom of expression, freedom of protest, and so forth. In Guyana's constitution, the same is obtained here. So you don't have to wait on a political opposition for you to exercise that right. You can go ahead and do so. But as we said before, and as we've done in the past, is that the APNU AFC lends support where we see breaches, flagrant breaches of persons' constitutional right to demonstrate and so forth. But again, even when you even when you exercise um, or even when you, as an opposition, represents the interests of persons in the courts. As I mentioned to you before, you don't get recourse there. Or if we bring this matter to the attention of the Ghana police force, you don't get redress there. So who do we complain to? And to as well, you have to be worried of your objective. Many people, when you speak to them and they tell you about taking to the streets, you ask, what is the objective? To what end? What you want to achieve? And you would hear something like, the government got come out. So in their view, it is a demonstration to bring down a government. That is something completely different.
Mm.
If it is a case that you bring in, you're calling for justice for the Henry boys and those persons who have been fingered in the murder, that is something completely different. But many times when you speak to folks and they talk about protest and demonstration, they are speaking about a demonstration to bring down a government. That is something completely different. And
Yeah,
that's
and
why we got to ensure that you know exactly what is the objective.
yeah, I certainly agree. Um, let me bring Ms. McDonald back in the picture. Then I'll ask you both one more question, and we wrap up because we have busy days, a busy day ahead of you. As a matter of fact, you'll be going to the weekend, and you definitely will have lots of stuff. But MP McDonald, another burning issue is this issue of the um, the purging of our labor force, the purging of the public sector. What do we intend to do about, or what, I don't know, what is the opposition's plan? I've asked Mr. Dorton that question, and I've asked some other folk the question, but I don't seem to be getting an answer that might satisfy Guyanese, because you see the thing pop up every day. They ask you the same question, but we still didn't get a response. So what do we plan to do to stop the government from doing the nonsense that they're doing? And that's in the first place. And the secondly, to get them to rescind some of those decisions made with regards to those people that they terminated illegally.
Only let me put it this way: the power for change is in the hands of the people. Again, let me repeat: the power for change is in the hands of the people. Our public servants have the power in their hands to change almost everything that is being done wrong within the public service sector. But here is what we have happening. One, we have leaders within the trade union movement. Some, and I feel I'm going to get more licks for this, but I have to say it anyhow. Some of them have been there for a while. They were very, very useful. They did what they were supposed to do. But the time has come for them to step aside, offer advice from behind, and allow new, vibrant, vigorous leaders to emerge. That's one of the problems we have, where we have some of our leaders who have, and I don't mean to be rude to our trade union leaders, because I'm a trade union leader myself. I'm also president of the Ghana Trades Union Congress. But we have some of our leaders who have decided that they will remain in those positions, whether they do or they don't do for their members, they will remain in those positions. The other issue we have is that we have two other issues. One, because of this dictatorship ship, let me put it that way, that has begun to sail, lots of fear is being instilled in many, many of our workers across the sectors. And this is because these workers are not equipped with the necessary tools. And the tools I'm talking here about is that of union knowledge, knowing what your rights and your responsibilities are. In addition to that, those members, even some of them who know what their rights and the responsibilities are, they are afraid to step out there because they're not sure that their union leaders, if for some reason they get into conflict with maybe one of the supervisors or the permanent secretary or maybe one of the ministers, and they're being victimized, that the union leaders will step in and offer the kind of support that is so needed. And so that basically compounds the problem that we have within the labor movement. We have some unions that are strong, some unions that can stand on their own. And let me narrow this down here. Within the teaching fraternity, there is one union that represents teachers across this country, which is the GTU, the Guyana Teachers Union. Within the GTU's structure, like every other union's structure, we have an executive council, we have a general council. And our members within the general council body, they are just as strong as the central executive officers. They are just as strong as the executive council members. And so when there are issues, on many occasions, unless it's an issue that is of some great magnitude that requires interfacing with the minister or the PS directly, our general council reps, who are referred to as shop stewards in other union settings, our general council reps are there to face those issues frontal. And so our teachers have recognized that when the GTU says stop, they stop, because they know at the end of the day, they have the backing of the leaders of the GTU who would not sit there and allow injustices to be meted out to our teachers. And so I've been saying to our union leaders over the years, the unions, we have one mandate, and our mandate is to protect our workers, our members from injustices. Our mandate is to ensure that equal rights is being given across the board. Our mandate is to ensure that our workers, our members are comfortable within their work settings, and to ensure that their salaries and other conditions of work are in compliance with what is so prescribed in the Constitution within the labor laws.
So am I to suppose that you are kind of suggesting in a way that the unions have a role to play in ensuring that people's rights are recognized and respected?
Of course, that's the function of the union.
Okay.
That's the function of a union. And I'm narrowing down here to GTU because I am there and I am a part of what happens there. Every month, we have a GTU and U program. As a matter of fact, let me say to you, every month, we usually have our GTU branch meetings where teachers all across this country, we have 42 branches in Guyana. And so every month, with the exception of those branches that are in the hinterland, where they have, and because of their geographic span, they have branch meetings once per term. And this is one of the conditions that we would have signed on to in our agreement. So that happens every month. But because of COVID, we cannot have the face-to-face interactions and face-to-face branch meetings. So what GTU would have done is we bought the Zoom license, and we have our Zoom, not only general council and executive council meetings, but we have our branch meetings. We also have the GTU and U program where on these programs once per month, we not only talk about rights and responsibilities, but we invite personnel from different agencies. The program that we are going to have following up this next month will deal with NIS and the benefits. And so we've already engaged the officers at NIS, and they're going to be on the program. And so this is what our unions should be doing. Our unions should be equipping their members with the necessary skills and knowledge that is needed to allow them to function effectively in the workplace. So that if a minister comes in the workplace to tell the staff that you cannot use your phone and you should not be using your phone, and we want to see who you have on your Facebook, who are your friends on Facebook, the members or that employee would be able to say to the minister, according to the labor laws, I am so guided where it is my right to be in contact with whoever I want to be in contact with, because outside of the labor laws, the constitution of this country gives me the right to be associated with whoever I want to be associated with, whichever party, whichever union. But this dictatorship government that we have here, they have sought to instill fear in people. That's the only way they know to govern, by instilling fear. And so with all of these dismissals that we're having, one, the MPs, the coalition, we have already put in place an everyday meeting the public where persons from the general public can come in to the leader of the opposition's office to air their concerns, where we have MPs every day, all day, meeting, interfacing with the public, listening to their concerns. We advise them, and those that they cannot deal with themselves, we will deal with that. On the other hand, the unions, you would have seen when we had the issue with the nurses, the public service union stepped in and they had some sort of arrangement. I'm not sure what it is, but we have still seen the dismissal of many of our workers. And here it is where we are going to have where we must have our unions coming together as one strong, unified force to deal viciously with these issues. It is amazing that this illegal group of people that say they care, in this COVID pandemic, they have continued to dismiss thousands of persons. And many of those persons are of African descent. I am not sure. Again, I know persons will say, well, we've been hearing that. But I want to say, this will not continue for very long. Because, like old people would say, when a cat's back is against the wall, he would scratch anything that passes in front of him. And that's the stage that this fraudulent government is setting. And I'm hoping that they can deal with the repercussions of their actions. I'm going to pause there.
Yeah, I'm wondering. My learned friend MP Jones said earlier that, and you would have alluded to it just now too, that the people have the power in their hands. I did mention that there's some concern with regard to leadership. A lot of the folk are looking to the APNU, their party, the majority party in Guyana. I mean, they're not in government because of nefarious activities and what have you, but the majority party in Guyana. People are looking to this party for support and to some extent guidance. Now, a lot of persons would have mobilized in the not too distant past, but those efforts were shut down because there seemed to be some amount of division within the ranks of the party. Because the chairman of the party at the time stood on the streets of Georgetown and called the people off of the streets. If you remember, there were protest actions building along the west coast of Beast and the east coast of Demerara, and they were spreading. By then, it had built up in Linden too. And then some people took to the streets in Georgetown. And in Georgetown, I remember Commodore Lawrence standing there and asking people not to protest. So people are alluding to that now. Some people are saying, why should we go on the street? What sense does it make? Who's going to listen to us? Who's supporting us? Because the party that we're leaning on to support, they're saying one faction is saying, don't go on, and another side is saying, well, if you go, we'll support you. So, um, how how do they balance the equation there, Mr. Jones?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think, is it my mic?
No, you got to go.
Right. No, I was getting the feedback. Right. No, as I said before, is that listen, the leadership is there. In Well, I don't want to start to try to put in context the statement from the chairman of the PNC, but essentially, I think on her own visit to the region, whatever she saw, whatever led to her pronouncement, I have a different view, and still have that different view. Is that persons have every legitimate right to exercise their legitimate discontent, and in whatever way, form, and fashion, you would want to ensure that damage to property and an individual is not had at any point in time. I agree with that fully. But however, it should not be a reason for you to tell people that they should not take to the street to voice their dissatisfaction. What I know what that was obtained in the past, I said to people, I've been active in the hustings of this country since 1997, which would put me at the age of 17. I've now crossed that 40 threshold, even though I don't look that way, but that's what right? So I've been a part of endless protest demonstration for everything under the sun in this country for the past 20, 23 years thereabout. And what I know that the PPP is good at is that they identify those, what we call the agent John provocateurs, to enter the ranks of the demonstration, of the protest that is happening. And those persons have a specific objective. One, identify East Indian people and snatch their bags or physically assault them. Two, do damage to people's property, whether it's a car, bike, whatever the case be, and so forth. Fling 2 bottles at the police, so the police have justification to use rubber bullets or tear gas, and so forth and so forth. That is still a factor now, because what they did then is that essentially they paid people. You had names being called such as Odinga Lubumba, who had that specific responsibility and so forth to identify those youths from those depressed communities who are unemployed and have responsibility, and say to them that look at $10,000, look at $20,000. All you got to do is pelt 2 bottles at the police, and the police open fire. Legitimately so, because I mean, if the police come under attack, they have a right to defend themselves and try to arrest the perpetrators. So that is what the PPP does in all of the protest demonstration. That's what they always do: insert their agent John provocateurs in the protest so it becomes something other than the objective set out. Even outside of that, that happens the world over. That is nothing new. Even in the Black Lives Matter March, you saw organizers of the Black Lives Matter March had to physically put people out of the lines or even take them to the police. So it's nothing strange. And that should not be the rationale for any leader or leaders to tell people that come off of the street because you burn a tire or you break 2 bottles. Absolutely nonsense. You have a right to exercise your legitimate discontent. And if, as I said to you before, I go call you Rick Ford. I went to the police. And vent my frustration, raise my issue. I got no recourse. I took the matter to the court. I spoke to the judge, the magistrate with my lawyers. I got no recourse. The opposition took this to the Parliament of Guyana. They brought motions and all of that before the House. It was not allowed. The speaker shut it down. I have no recourse. What do I do? As a Guyanese, I have a right. I have a right to live. I have a right to provide. I have a right to earn. I have a right to increase my economic activities in this country, in this place of my birth. And if you will deny me those basic rights, I have a right to for an investigation to be had and closure to some family member of mine who have been murdered. And if all of these institutions that are there to provide me with that sort of recourse or redress that I want, and all of them are failing, then it's for me to take my action. And the Constitution of this country provides me with that right to so do. And that is why I get peeved at times when people and it's individuals who are no stranger to what obtained in this country in the 23 years. A leopard don't change his spot. And within the 5 months, almost everything that was obtained under the PPP, you see come back. Heinous crime, 10.5 tons of cocaine intercepted, emanating from Guyana. And the list goes on, termination of black people. And you have to call it what it is. A lot of people at times tells you that, listen, you mustn't talk about the race thing. You can't say black people getting knocked off because you sound like a racist. And that is what they use. That is a tool they use to shut you up. So even though you are seeing this before your eyes, because they say to you, if you say it, you sound like a racist, so you remain quiet. I don't know about that. I have to call it for what it is. And everyone sees the elephant in the room, but nobody wants to address the matter. Nobody wants to speak about the elephant in the room. I am tired of that nonsense. I am tired of it. And more so is that this was obtained in 23 years under them. And in the 5 years under the APNU AFC government, ain't got one single one of them in the PPP or any part could point the finger to the APNU AFC government and says, under your government, these people were murdered. The crime was never solved. Under your government, these in East India people were terminated or deprived of economic opportunity or deprived of accessing to land and well-being and so forth. They can't say that. So after you have had an opportunity to see what governance is, leadership is in terms of a country, ensuring that the prosperities of the country, the wealth and the resources of this country is shared to every Guyanese, not because you're AP and you AFC or PNC or PPP, but because you are a Guyanese. And that is what was obtained in this country under the AP and AFC government. We've had a 5 year of the most decent leadership in governance. Guyana was once again respected the world over. Before APNU AFC in government, you travel to Barbados and these places, and they put you on a bench. They put you to sit on a bench. You've had situations in which Guyana was named a narcotic state by the US State Department, a narcotic state. We've had 10 years in this country in which former President David Granger described as the 10 years of trouble or the troubled times. 10 years. You've had the Lusignan massacre, the Kaichura News massacre, the Baratika massacre. You've had the Mandela trio. You've had shootings on a daily basis in this country. You've even had a sitting minister of the People's Progressive Party civic government was murdered in his home along with his siblings and the security. And not even the PPP, for their own minister that was murdered, they didn't even launch an investigation. It was PNU AFC in office that President Granger called an investigation to be had into the killing of Sat Diosa. You've had the discovery of numerous airstrips in the interior location in which the narcotics trade used those to land their stuff here in Guyana. And you would think that under the PPP, that they will send the Ghana Defense Force to remove and destroy those people. It never happened. And under the 5 years of the AP and UAFC government, we have not had a repeat of that. We've had the calmest, most stable administration in which every Guyanese, irrespective of his or her ethnicity, were able to work and earn. And a lot of people keep bashing the AP and UFC government. Man, when you are in power, you only knock off these people and you have kept these people. It is a demonstration of a modern democracy and governance. This is not 1964. This is not 1992. This is 2020 or 2021 now. And you now want it to be or demonstrate that democracy that you preach of, you have to demonstrate it. Demonstrate it. And that is what the APNU AFC government did. Could you imagine that Anil Nandalal, the current PPP Attorney General wife, who was working in the Ministry of the Presidency, was allowed to continue working in the press and publicity department directly with President David Granger. And she was allowed to work there for the entire 5 years, earn her salary, irrespective that she is the wife of a PPP executive. That is leadership. That is governance. That is modern governance that we're talking about. Not this nonsense that you have here. You had no, in fact, I don't know if you know the last numbers in terms of people who have been terminated. It now stands at 1,487 persons who have been terminated, 95% of which happens to be Guyanese of African descent. Now, don't you see a pattern? It is as clear as day. It is as clear as day. You've had the Attorney General going after persons who got lands from Lands and Survey, legitimately so. It is not illegal. It is not to say that they went and just occupied these lands. They applied. They paid their fees. They paid their dues. And Anil Nandalal is going after them and dispossessing people of their lands. I should add, dispossessing Black people or Afro-Guyanese of their lands. How could that be justified? Anil Nandalal left the comforts of his home in Georgetown and traveled to the Mahaika Borbis region, Region 5, to a village named Kingley, to say to his East Indian supporters that you should tear down the fence and operate like if you own the land. And mind you, the land that he's speaking about are ancestral lands that happens to be that of Mr. Lincoln Lewis and Afro-Guyanese. When you think that the Ethnic Relations Commission would be called to action after reading and seeing that, not a word. So the ERC's rules and regulation don't apply to the PPP. It applies to people on Facebook. And even that, and even their modus operandi tells you that there's something more in it. That recently you saw 4 persons being brought before the courts and charged and paid a fine of $100,000 each for their statements that they made on their Facebook or in a Facebook comment. Mind you, you had renowned Auntie Sucky, as her name is, last year, a text post, but a video post about 14 minutes in duration. And she cussed from the beginning to the end, calling Guyanese of African descent hungry belly dog, white mouth, and all of that. And all the ERC did is ask her to apologize. So she came back the following day and said she was intoxicated. But the same ERC now charge 4 young people who all are African Guyanese for text comment that they made. What does that tell you? Then you have the situation with the DPP, the Department of Public Prosecution, that when the PPP came into being, illegally so, on March the 2nd, the DPP dropped the charges on Anil Nandalal for the law books, dropped the charges on Irfan Ali for the 19 fraud charges that is before him, dropped the charges on Ashni Singh, dropped the charges on Mr. Brassington, dropped the charges on Claudette Singh. Note the names: Singh, Nandalal, Brassington, all Guyanese of East Indian descent. And at the same time, the same DPP, Department of Public Prosecution, has charges for Mingo, Lowenfield, Myers, James Bond, Carol Joseph, Valda Lawrence, Christopher Jones, now London, and I can't remember the other names, all of which you could now add David Patterson, all of which happens to be Guyanese of African descent. Now you tell me that it ain't so. It's just coincidence. It's just an accident, you know? I remember I telling people that listen, how I view things is like, once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, but 3, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15, 20 something time, it's a blatant pattern. And that is what is happening in this country. That Afro-Guyanese are being charged, terminated, dispossessed of their lands, and the list goes on. It's like you have no rights. You understand me? Afro-Guyanese in this country for the past 5 months have been stripped of their dignity, stripped of their rights to earn, stripped of any rights to further economic prosperity in this country. And that is why I say to people, you don't have to get no AP and UAFC leaders to lead you. The evidence is before you, and you are guided by the Constitution that give you that right to demonstrate. And that's what I'm saying. You tried everything. So no international community and CARICOM and these people could come to you later and say, man, why didn't you explore? Let's come with all these fancy language and listen to me. I live, yes, sir. I experience it. To date, my children, even walking on the street, if they see a police vehicle, the amount of disdain, suck teeth. You understand me? They have left a permanent stain in the minds of my children as it relates to police, men and women. And it was never like that before. I reach out to the people when my eldest son was small, probably 8 years old, and we driving in the vehicle, and he's at the back seat, window drawn down, and a police pull up alongside. If you see this boy waving to the police, and the police waving back, it was, the daddy, I want to be a police. No, you hate the police. You don't want to see the police. And still, my daughter is still very much traumatized. Very much traumatized. If she's sitting on the veranda and a police vehicle comes through the street, she runs inside. That is the life in this country. And that is what was obtained under the PPP. And this is why it's such a vexing issue that when you see ambassadors like Sarah Lynch and Brett Quinn and the Canadian one and you coming out and making pronouncements about these people, oh my God.
Yeah. I have one final question for you guys, and then we must leave. But we way over the time that we've set ourselves. A lot of our young people have been saying that this whole situation, because if you know, America had the largest voter turnout for the elections this year. Guyana is said to have had the largest voter turnout for elections last year as well. But a number of our young people are now saying that they will never again allow themselves to be a part of the whole electoral process. They're not going to go out to vote. What word of advice? And they're saying it based on what's happening currently, as well as what happened during the electoral process, and against the backdrop that, in their opinion, like I said before, there's nothing there to give them the assurance that their effort was worth the while. So what word of advice in the next 1 minute each, what word of advice would you give to those young people? Ms. McDonald, and I'll have Mr. Jones get the final word.
Well, O'Neill, let me say this before I answer the question. I want to reassure every single Guyanese out there, every single young man and young woman, every single teenager out there, that I, Coretta McDonald, I have dedicated my life to advocating for rights and equal justice. And I will fight with every single breath in me, every single fiber in me, to ensure that our people, regardless of how long it's going to take us, that our people, whether you're Afro-Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese, Amerindian Guyanese, you're of Chinese origin, regardless of who you are, I am going to ensure that some of the atrocities that have been meted out to others, you will not have to endure that. And I'm saying that to say this: I will dedicate my time, my energies to be meeting with people all across this country. Boys, girls, young men, young women, older women, whoever you be, I will dedicate my time to travel this country to ensure that I meet with our people, talk with them, empower them, and give them the assurance that as long as you understand what the Constitution says, and as long as you understand where what you have planned for your destiny, that together we are going to hold this fort and we will sail the ship. All we want you to do is to throw off some of the disdain that you have with the process that went through in 2020. Regroup and let's move again. Because we cannot allow the events of 23 years, even though we have seen the unfolding of some of them, to have that retake this country of ours. I will fight with every being in me to ensure that some of these things will not happen. And I'm not afraid. I am not afraid of any of the systems that they have out there. I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I will abide by the laws. But by the same laws that have been enshrined in the Constitution, it gives me the right to engage, to protest, and to shout very loudly when injustices are being meted out to our people. I get very worked up because I'm a Guyanese. We're all Guyanese. There's no second class and first class and third class rating of any one of us when we look at the Constitution. But the PPP government, these illegal set of people, these heartless people, these reckless people, these mad people that we have there who want to govern country, they have decided that they are going to make Guyanese citizens first, second, and third class citizens. But let me say to them, you have a rude awakening that is upcoming. Just hold fast.
Mr. Jones?
I think essentially a lot of the young people who were first time or perhaps second time voters in the last elections experienced, like many of us elders, experienced firsthand geopolitics. Geopolitics is what played in Ghana's elections, and of course in the lead up to those elections, in which you see things, you're told things, and all of which you know now were not truth. But it was all part of a geopolitics at play. And that in itself will serve as a deterrent, a turn off to any young person who was a first time voter. I don't believe I can't, what you're reading and what you're seeing. And that is why I say to them that the experience, like I did for the first time in our elections in Guyana, geopolitics at play. Guyana's oil resources is what many players in Guyana and abroad want to have access to. By virtue of your last government that you had, the APNU AFC, by virtue of the leadership or the leader that you have in His Excellency President David Granger, is that those persons who wanted to seek the economic prosperity for themselves and their friends and families, knew that they could not bring that to a David Granger led administration. And that is why misinformation in the public domain, you had individuals and organizations in various places put out statements in which were damning to the APNU AFC government and President David Granger. And it was all geopolitics. I draw to your attention now the recent withdrawal of a report that came out from Global Witness just weeks before the general and regional elections in this country. And that report from Global Witness was so damning to the APNU AFC government that essentially it set the tone for people wanting to get rid of this wicked and evil APNU AFC government. Look what they're doing, they give away oil resources, 2% and all of that. And after the mischief achieved its objective of bringing about regime change in this country, you saw just recently the same Global Witness withdrew their report. But the report was placed there because it had an objective. Similarly, like happened in the United States elections with Hillary Clinton and the sudden leak of emails and so forth, and an investigation by the FBI, and then subsequently you hear it's not so. We witnessed for the first time geopolitics and regime change. So the APNU AFC and its leaders, we were up against the world. And we said that to people during the recount. It was us against the world. And all of them, and we said before, whether it's the Americans, the British, the Canadians, the European Union, is that they have no permanent friends, but interests. And whatever to serve their interests, they go about to seek that objective. And that was what was obtained. So when you see statement from Ambassador Lynch and Gwet Quinn and Chacha G and all of that, it was part and parcel of a bigger plot that unfolded in this country. When you had the chairman of the Elections Commission here in Guyana being told by a senior diplomat that the elections of 2020 is bigger than Guyana, and therefore her ruling has to be in that step. It tells you what was obtained. So I know all of that would serve as a deterrent. It serves as a turn-off to you. But you have to be aware of what was obtained, what happened. And therefore, it should encourage you or enforce you to want to fight even harder to ensure that international pressures should not be the rationale for changing government in a country, unless that government is one of which we had under the PPP. I've been through, as a young person at age 17, I've been part of the 1997 elections, part of the 2001, 2006, 2011, until 2015. And those 4 elections before 2015, after those elections, of course, me, man, Chris, you young, why you wasting time with this? Is that, listen, I believe that Guyana has all of the resources that all of its peoples, irrespective of their ethnicity, irrespective of their political persuasion, should have an equal opportunity to benefit from the resources of this country. I believe that the lands in this country is so plentiful that no Guyanese ought to be fighting or jostling over each other to get a single plot of land to build his or her house. And by virtue of knowing these facts in terms of our resources that are available, is that as a young person, I want to ensure that a leadership that could govern this country for all of its people that was obtained under the APNU AFC government, I have to ensure that such a government is in place. My time on earth will soon come. I have 3 children who have to live in this country. And therefore, as young people, we have to ensure that we put Guyana on a path in which all of its people can benefit from, so that our future generation will be able to benefit from that administration. That is why, as hard as this is, we encourage you to suck it up and let's go again for the good fight.
All right, Well, there you have it. Thank you very much, MPs Coretta McDonald and Christopher Jones. I know we had a very long discussion. I learned a whole lot of things, and I'm happy that we did have a number of things clarified as well. I'm looking at the comments as we go. There's some people who are in favor of the discussion, some people who are still expressing their frustrations. But I guess with time, people will get the message and they will overcome. I guess when we get to the next elections, in the immediate lead up to those elections, forces will feel the fire and get in the mix again and try to do what is necessary for us to do. My thing is has always been, if we do not continue to fight for justice, then giving up, the option of giving up leaves the door open for autocracy, authoritarianism, and eventually we have no say in what is going on in that. But I say this, that beautiful country that we all call home and we love so dearly. So I like to join with both Miss McDonald and Mr. Jones and say to us all, in spite of our frustrations, we need to play our part in ensuring that the Constitution of Guyana is always upheld and respected, the laws of Guyana are always respected, and a government for the people, all of the people, is in place. Whenever we experience a situation where a government is not governing for all of the people, then we should take the necessary action at the polls to remove them and give somebody who's promising to govern for all of Ghana that
Mhm.
opportunity. And I trust that we all get that message and act in accordance with the message whenever the next election is due. Whether it be next year because of something, some parliamentary action or something, or as scheduled as per constitution. Thank you very much again, Ms. McDonald and Mr. Jones. Mr.